Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to go down to Cornwall in the southwest of England. Cornwall of course is one of the Celtic nations, but we're going to go to a little town called Trekillick, which is in the northern part of Cornwall. So we're going to go to the Harbour Brewing Company and have a taste of one of the beers from their craft range. The craft range has a different label from the regular range, but this guy is a Doppelbock, and I chose this beer because obviously living in Germany I did have a great choice of Doppelbocks over there, so hopefully this one can kind of match up to that. And I found that when English beer is done well, it's done very well. Usually the ones that we get up here in Scotland in the supermarkets are these horrible watery things, but if you go to the specialist beer shops you get little breweries like this who do tend to produce very, very good beer. So hopefully this one lives up to that accolade as well. But as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll take you through a very kind of brief history of the company. It will only be a minute or two because these guys are very, very new. If you do want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below, along with a link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do from the Harbour Brewing Company in the near future, because this is my very, very first taste of one of their beers. So anyway, as I told you, this brewery is based in Trekillick in northern Cornwall, and Harbour Brewing Company was founded in 2012 by Rhys Powell and Eddie Lofthouse. Now Rhys had studied brewing and distilling at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, who do happen to have produced many a good brewer over the years, including the two that spring to mind are the Cromarty Brewery, Craig up there, and also Baldur Carrison from Einstök, so do check out those breweries as well. But he'd previously worked for Sharp's Brewery in Cornwall, and these guys are actually probably the most well-known Cornish brewery, if you like. Those of you watching in Canada, America, Australia and New Zealand and stuff probably will be able to find their beers, and I'm sure I saw them in Japan, and you might even have some luck getting them in the likes of South America as well. But he'd been working there while Eddie had been running his family business, which was the Atlantic Hotel and Bar in New Polzeath in Cornwall. But in 2011 this hotel was to be reconstructed as a new building with a restaurant and bar and all of this, but at this time Eddie actually decided that he wanted to change career. So the pair decided in a pub where all good ideas start in late 2011 that they would open up their own brewery, and they named it Harbour Brewing after the place that it was conceived. But they wanted room in their brewery to be as creative as possible with their beer, so Eddie actually found a 10 British barrels brewer system, which was built in Hungary but designed basically by the American firm Bavarian Brewing Technology. So they still have this, and you can check out on the website, it shows you a picture of all their kit, and they explain a little bit behind the kind of industrialish process of the beer. They explain why they do certain things, so it's actually quite a nice little website they have. So as I say, go and check it out. But that's your brief history of the Harbour Brewing Company, a very, very new brewery, and hopefully their beer is very good as well. To list the guys you get in the core range from this, you get the Amber Ale, the India Pale Ale, Light Ale and just a regular Pale Ale as well. But they've also got some craft bottles which sound very nice. They had a vanilla stout in this one which sounded really, really nice. I hope I can try that one for you at some point. But they do very hoppy IPAs and double IPAs and things like that, and this guy is a member of the craft range, so this is why the label is quite different on it. So do just keep an eye on their website and on their Facebook page and stuff. I'll put that in the description below for you too, but keep an eye on the things that are coming out of this brewery, because the guys in the shop up here did recommend it, and it's quite good to go to the little craft beer shops in Scotland because we do get the really good English beer up here, and they wouldn't stock it if it wasn't good. So I'm very hopeful that this guy is a very nice beer. But without further ado, let's actually get on to the tasting of this one. It didn't tell you on the website. I actually couldn't find a description of this beer on the website. They only had their main range listed, so I don't know what hops and malts and things are in that, because usually you can speculate a little bit about the flavours and stuff, but unfortunately I can't do that with this one. All I can really tell you is that it's a 7.4% Doppelbock, so usually you would expect dark caramel flavours, sort of treacly molasses, and usually some red fruits as well. It's usually quite a roasted and kind of big bready beer, but 7.4%. I'll just put the light down and see if you can see that a bit better. But this is how all the craft range beers on the side. It just says on the side a little bit about the alcohol consumption units, the ingredients: water, hops, yeast, malted barley and wheat, and it has the Harbour Brewing thing on it. And you can see there's a best by date there too, so that's the Harbour Brewing Company symbol, and it is on the bottle caps as well. It's quite nice, so I probably will keep the bottle cap from this guy. But without further ado, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting. Yeah, so as you can see, a nice smoky opening there. You can smell a little bit of the caramel coming off this guy as you pour it, but unlike some of the other beers I've had, the aroma as you pour it, without paying too much attention of course, isn't all that strong. But as you can see, it's poured a nice sort of, it's actually poured a nice kind of red ruby colour somewhere. Maybe a rosewood is a good way to describe that beer, but it is actually quite clear. You can't see it probably too well with the camera, but you can. It is actually quite transparent. It's not hazy. It's just really the dark colour that's actually making this beer appear as if it is hazy. There, as you could see as well, there was a finger of head on it. It was a kind of creamy coloured head rather than a sort of full white head, but it looks very nice. It's just going down to be a very thin foamy layer now. In terms of carbonation, there's a few big bubbles sticking to the side, but just some very small little bubbles going up towards the bottom of the head, and as you can see, the head now has just gone completely to be just a little foamy layer. But the thing, you can actually smell a good bit of minerally, there's a good bit of minerally water coming off this actually. But it's when you take a little bit of a deeper smell in, without sugaring it up of course, you can see that you get a lot of the more roasted caramel coming off this guy. So if you take a little bit of bat, you will smell the kind of minerals coming out of the water, and just a little bit of red fruit, of course, a typical element of the Doppelbock, of the kind of Doppelbock aroma if you like. But if you go in a little bit more, that's when you get the dark roasted caramel and slightly bready character out. So to give it a sugar up, yeah, when you give it a sugar up, it actually does smell really quite boozy, and of course that's where you'll find the sort of caramel aromas and flavours in there, is in that boozy section of the beer. So you've got a nice dark kind of treacle, sort of treacle nose, or molasses as you would call it over in America. But it's a nice dark caramelly sort of brown sugar nose coming off of this. Quite toasted actually, I would say. A big toasted dark brown sugar malt coming out of it. But you can pick up, I think there's a little bit of a breadiness in there, maybe a sort of sweet rye bread, but maybe that's just the caramel kind of going over the top of it. I can't really smell any chocolate off of this one, which is sometimes something you get in a Doppelbock. Not everyone has it, but this one I don't think has it. This is more of a big dark caramel, but there is quite a good bit of red fruit in there, and it's quite sharp actually too. So I want to say it's more of a kind of plum, a sort of plum or raisin red fruit that comes off this guy. Usually if it's a bit lighter you do get some figs, but if you breathe it in a bit more deeply, you do get that kind of less sharp note, and you do get the kind of smoother figgy aroma. But I mean, overall the aroma is very nice. It's got all the elements you would expect of a Doppelbock beer. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this guy. Give it a smell before you try it. But this is the Doppelbock from the Harbour Brewing Company in Trekillick, Cornwall. Slàinte. It's actually very... What's interesting about this is, I think on the first impression, it is actually quite fruit forward. The first thing that struck my mind about that beer there was the red fruit coming out first. It's very different. It's very different from the German Doppelbocks, but that's not to say it's not nice. It's actually a really nice and really quite interesting beer actually. Just let your mouth adjust slightly to it as you try it. What's interesting about this beer is that on first taste it comes in and it's got a really quite sharp red fruity character to it that comes in, and then it just fades away to be this very light sort of rye breadish malt, and there's a bit of the toastiness just lying on the tongue there too. The feel of this beer, it has all the components of a Doppelbock flavour, but the thing that's a bit confusing for me, having drunk German Doppelbocks, is that the feel of it is very different. As I say, it's a mild bready thing. Usually with a Doppelbock it's a big caramel, a big caramelly flavour that sits there with just a little bit of the red fruit on the outside of the tongue, but this guy is just very different from that. In the aftertaste you've got a slightly roasted caramel element just moving out towards the edge of the tongue, and there's a kind of slightly earthy hop character I think on the back sides of the tongue, but in the middle you've just got this rye bready blanket of flavour. It's quite nice. But yeah, once your mouth adjusts to it a little bit more, you do feel when the liquid's actually in your mouth, you're picking up more of the caramel flavour. So there's a nice big dark caramel malt there that kind of coats the middle of the tongue, and underneath that you're getting a bit more of the bread, as I say, that rye bread sweetness, and that just builds up as you move more into the aftertaste, and that's kind of what's quite prominent on the aftertaste, and then the caramel moves out a little bit towards the edge of the tongue. And I do want to say there is just a little touch of earthy hop in that, and that's a nice touch. That's a kind of English style beer thing. I always think the earthy hops really is more of an English touch to the beer, so it's very interesting in that regard. The fruit, you get just a little oily bubble moves towards the front of your tongue on this, and that's where you're getting most of the fruit flavours. Yeah, you get this oily bubble just behind the very front of your tongue, and you get a nice fruity flavour in there, and it is a good mix between the sort of sharp flavours of the raisins and plums that you get from the esters, but it also has a nice kind of figgy smoothness behind it, I think, as well. So it's a very interesting beer. There's a little bit of hoppy dryness around the front of the tongue there, and that's where you're getting the kind of fruit characters coming out. But I want to say there is a little bit of an earthy hop character in there too. As I say, it would have been really interesting to know what hops they'd used, because I actually really like that just very slight touch of earthy character. But there's a nice, as I say, a nice toasted caramel malt that blankets the tongue. You've got a little bit of a kind of slightly rye-ish bread sweetness under there, and just a little bit of earthy hop character around the edges of the tongue, and then the fruit flavours are coming out towards the front of the palate there. So it's really nicely done. As I say, a very different feel to the German Doppelbocks, but it does have all the components of the flavour, and it's very interesting and very tasty beer actually. It feels a lot, in terms of the mouthfeel, it's actually it feels quite a bit lighter than the German Doppelbocks. I would always describe a Doppelbock over there as being quite full-bodied. This is definitely more of a mid-bodied beer. The carbonation in it is perfect. It's nice and soft, but it feels a little bit lighter in the mouth. That doesn't mean it lacks at all in flavour. It does have all the components of the flavour, but you've got a good bit of alcohol warmth from this one. You do actually taste the nice alcohol booziness that mixes in with the caramel quite well in this, but it's a big sweet malty beer this, and the oily feel is quite nice. So if you like a Doppelbock that isn't quite as heavy as some of these German ones can be, then this is a very good beer to go for. As I say, the mouthfeel is really quite different, but it doesn't mean that the beer lacks in flavour at all, and I really like it. I'd happily drink this beer again. To me, this is a tasting beer that you want to taste and just enjoy the flavours of, or drink it in winter when you want something that's a little bit more warming. So it's a very, very nice beer, and I have to compliment the Harbour Brewing Company on that. But yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Hopefully I can go back and review a few more of their beers. The double IPA and the vanilla stout actually sounded really nice, so maybe I can get one or two more of those. They actually sounded really, really good. I'm not sure if they'll still have them in the shop, but fingers crossed I can get a hold of them. But as always, please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer if you do happen to have tried it. Always really cool to try really good beers from England, because as I say, they're in short supply up here. But as always, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Hopefully I can revisit these guys in the fairly near future, and I will catch you soon with my next beer review. Cheers!